Hello and welcome into the Inside Nebraska YouTube channel. I am Greg Smith, Senior Recruiting Analyst here, and I am joined for a rapid reaction, the morning after edition, by staff writer Steve Marik to talk about what happened with Nebraska's loss last night in Ireland, 31-28 to Northwestern. But first things first, Steve, how are you on this lovely Sunday morning?
I'm doing great. Aside from the outcome and our message board kind of melting down a little bit, it was a fun day of football. I had a lot of fun covering it for Inside Nebraska, and even though it was a loss, but it was still football. It was still good to watch it live and react to things that were actually happening on a field. But yeah, hopefully better days to come here.
Yeah, you have to hope that it can somehow get better from here. But we'll dive into all of that and more here on this video. But I want to start here on that topic is from the actual game. I think the pivotal moment that everyone is kind of circling as where that game turned for Nebraska is coincidentally when they were up 11, when Scott Frost elected to kick an onside kick and kind of go for the jugular. And I think that it's a fascinating data point of this game for numerous reasons. The first and foremost one being it didn't work, right? So I guess we should say that because if it had worked, this team is now letting her rip. No fear failure, all of that stuff would have come out. Unfortunately for Nebraska and Scott Frost, it did not work. And I think someone in, I forget the guy's name on Northwestern's team was asked about the onside kick afterwards and why they were prepared for it. And he said, paraphrasing here, it's Nebraska. We have to be prepared for anything. Or it's Nebraska. You never know is what he said, which is actually worse. And so I think that, Scott Frost, this was his first kind of foray into the CEO role, right? And if he was uncomfortable with not calling the plays during the game, he was unsure about his role. And this was the one thing that he really had his hands all over as we kind of look through what happened in this game, and it goes horribly. Steve, I guess what were your thoughts around that onside kick decision when it happened, and then kind of the talk afterwards?
I didn't really understand it. And of course, yeah, Scott's right. Like hindsight looking back, Scott took credit for it. He said that, yeah, it was my decision. And looking back on it, it probably didn't. I probably wouldn't do it again. I see the benefits of attempting it, like trying to capitalize on momentum. But I don't know at that point in time that it's just a massive risk. Just kick it away, give Northwestern a long field. Northwestern was okay offensively, but they weren't full of big plays. They were more of a grinded out offense in that game. And just to kick it away with your 11-point lead and make them go 80 yards or 75 yards or something like that, I think that would have been more advantageous for Nebraska instead of attempting an onside kick in the third quarter. I mean, it's just, I don't understand it. I think it's going to be rightly picked apart this week. He's going to have to answer more questions about it. It's just an odd call. And for someone who, had to give away his play calling duties to Mark Whipple, take more of a step back and be more of an offensive or a CEO type, like you said earlier, to have him come out and make that call in that situation in this game, in this kind of make or break season for him, and to have them not recover that onside kick, it's just a terrible look right now.
Yeah, it really is. There's no real way to skirt around that. But I also wonder too, it's one of those things where we've seen that particular story from Nebraska many times during the Scott Frost tenure, where one thing that happens during the game that's not even at the end of the game completely changes the momentum, and they can never quite recover from what happened. And it's just an uncanny ability that the program has right now to do that. It's oh no, here we go again. And on one hand, I don't blame the players for having that because there's been so many of those situations. And I think Frost said, they need some good stuff to happen to them after the game, so that they can kind of get that belief and really feel that they can do it and get over that hump. And so on one hand, I can understand the human nature element of that. But on the other hand, that's what you've trained for all off season long. to be able to say, hey, we got hit with some adversity and we're going to overcome that. I tweeted it a couple of times during the game because there were other moments where, okay, here's that test. They talked a lot about this over the offseason. How much did we hear that this is a different team? We've got new leadership. We've got better leadership. It's a tighter team than we've ever had. We've been training hard. All of those, things that you hear during the offseason. But when the rubber met the road once again, everything just fell apart for the team, and the thing started to snowball and they couldn't get it back. And that is not just to blame the players. Like, this is something where the coaches have to figure out a way to stop that too. Like, great coaches figure that out, right? Like, they figure out what it is that their team needs and they need to do. And the other way that you saw this kind of snowball effect happen with Nebraska is something that it's funny. You look back at the beginning of the game, and Northwestern was not really running the ball very well. I think at halftime, I want to say offhand, they had 36 rushing yards at halftime because Nebraska had 48. I do remember that because I remember thinking, man, neither team is able to run the ball. This is a weird game for the Big Ten. And then what do you know? Both teams started popping some runs in the second half. But one team sustained those throughout the game, and that was Northwestern. That ball got rolling against Nebraska when it came to the physicality of the football game, and Nebraska just could never recover from a physical standpoint.
Yeah, and a lot of it, in my opinion, had to do with the defense did not stop Northwestern's run game well at all. They got outmatched physically. And they were gassed in the fourth quarter, absolutely gassed. You could see it. It was clear as day. And it's because Nebraska's offense could not churn out yards on the ground and run some clock and hold on to the ball and play complementary football, because, the pass game looked great. Casey Thompson looked great for 2.5 quarters. But when that stopped working, as a football team, deep down, all football coaches in the world, I think, love themselves some run football, some rushing yards, and the offensive line for Nebraska did not get push. Anthony Grant did not have much running room, and he did a heck of a job kind of getting what he could in that game. I really liked what Anthony Grant
he did
showed.
a good job. That's going to get lost in this, honestly. But I thought that he did very well out there and went and took some steps towards being able to earn even more carries than what he got in this game. I'm totally with you there. I'm glad you mentioned that.
Absolutely. But yeah, a lot of the defensive woes for Nebraska was, in my opinion, it stems from the offense's inability to run clock, pick up yards on the ground. I mean, they could not. Nebraska's offense could not stay on the field in the fourth quarter, and that absolutely killed the Husker defense. But yeah, I mean, it just led to them. Northwestern had the ball for 34 minutes, over 34 minutes. Nebraska had it for a little over 25 minutes. That's rough. Nebraska's defense was on the field for a long time, and their tackling suffered. Their gap integrity suffered. Northwestern just, I think I looked it up after the game. Northwestern ended the game on 18 straight runs. They just pounded and pounded and pounded and kept coming, and Nebraska was gassed. They could not stop it. It made me, watching Northwestern's offensive kind of how they went about it yesterday, it made me kind of think, man, like, this is what Nebraska fans yearn for. This is what Nebraska fans want to see. And it's happening to their own team right now. So, I mean, respect to Northwestern, Pat Fitzgerald, and how they went about that. They were the tough team. They were the patient team. When everybody was freaking out about them kicking a field goal and running a run play on 3rd and 10, playing big old.
I thought the same thing at first until it hit me that, oh crap, they're playing complementary football and they're doing what they need to do. Yeah,
they were a well-coached team. That's a well-coached team. They're staying patient and they're playing 4 quarters. They were not trying to go for a knockout blow with an onside kick in the 3rd quarter.
Yeah, and that's what, and that is actually the perfect kind of juxtaposition of what Scott Frost teams want to do versus what, and it's not just Pat Fitzgerald and Northwestern. This is a characteristic of the Big Ten West. You could have inserted basically any team from the West into that role, and they would have performed or tried to execute the exact same thing, which is why I think it's troubling on numerous levels, on some of the other things that Frost said, because it continues to show, I think, that he doesn't understand quite what makes this league and this division in particular very good. But real quick on the physicality side of it, because everyone talked about this after the game from Nebraska. Scott Frost talked about it. Multiple players talked about it afterwards, and that Northwestern was just the more physical football team. And I don't think that there's anything that is more hurtful for Nebraska coming out of a game like this than to have to admit that, and say it out loud, that we just got out physical. And you saw it. You saw late, and it wasn't, now this happened a little bit throughout the game, where Nebraska's defensive linemen were just having a heck of a time getting off of blocks. Like, it just, but they're like, forget penetration, like they were just getting stonewalled up front. And then it just became just getting flattened by the time the end of the game hit, because they were gassed. And those creases turned into those, 3, 4, 5 yard gains were turning into a little bit more than that for Northwestern. But I think that the physical fitness of this team and the mental toughness towards the end was just not where it needs to be. And this has unfortunately been another characteristic of Scott Frost's program throughout the entire time he's been here. And it has been one of the most puzzling things, I think, overall about the program, considering who Scott Frost is, the era of football that he played in at Nebraska, and some of the people on his staff have some of that same mentality. Kind of, that whole thing is strange. And I think that as we are now at the point it's now August 28th, where you're starting to think about the totality of the Frost era at Nebraska, that is going to be one of the top, for me, 3 things that we're continuing to talk about here throughout this season. Now, before we get out of here, we definitely have to talk about one of the key post-game press conferences that will definitely be, or post-game press conference quotes that will definitely be talked about throughout this week. This is going to come up again. Steve, what was the quote that Scott Frost said about creativity in the offense?
Yeah, so I had the whole quote here. He was asked about the play calling and just kind of the ineffectiveness of the run game, his offense's run game, and he said, I think we're gonna have to learn as an offensive staff that you have to be a little creative in this league. So we have some things that we can work on. I thought we did a lot of good things, but it's got to be more of a complete game. When I heard him say that, I just thought to myself, like, why, you are the boss of this thing. Why are you saying that about a coworker, is what I was saying. Like, why would you say that to an assistant that you hired in Mark Whipple? Like, why? Why even put that
game
out there?
one? Game one,
it's the
we're
first
already
game.
doing this. Like, it's just it's really unfortunate that's already happening, because it goes to something that I know we've talked about on various podcasts with each other, of one of the key X factors with this thing. And there was so much talk in the offseason about how all the transfers and the new players and how that would come together. And I would always say, hey, you got to remember that we've got a new coaching staff coming together as well here, with a head coach that has had some difficulties meshing personalities and really kind of getting along and all of that stuff. We've seen a little bit of staff turnover and some cracks behind the scenes, especially within the staff. And so now we get game one, and we're already seeing that. And I think that comment was a big deal. I guarantee you that's going to come up in a staff meeting. Like, there's no way that it won't, because, then Scott Frost goes on to talk about a different answer about needing more cooperation and collaboration with the offensive play calling, which could only mean that he wanted more of a say in what was going on with the play calling. Like, and so, and I understand on one hand that it was the first time in 10 years that he had not called games, but it's not as if he didn't know that this was going to be the setup. You hired that guy, you hired him to do a job, let him do the job, and figure it out. Like, that comment honestly sets the groundwork for some real implosions down the road. It really does. And I don't know how else to really describe that.
Yeah, I just I can't believe that he would throw his assistants under the bus after one game. I can't believe that he said that, really. Like, you can just go in a press conference setting and be completely uninteresting and just say all the we got out physical, that's fine. We needed to execute better, that's fine. All the things that head coaches say after games, you can just say those. You do not have to say, as an offensive staff, we need to be a little bit more creative, or I think we need to cooperate a little bit more. There's no need to put that out there at
And
all.
honestly,
I don't know why
he
said that to his own assistants.
But if he feels that, that needs to be the expectation going into the week. Like, you guys created a game plan throughout the week. This was not a surprise sprung on him during the game in Ireland. He didn't get to Ireland on the sideline at beautiful Aviva Stadium and say, "Oh yeah, by the way, I'm going to be calling the plays, Mark Whipple." Like, that's not how that went, right? Like, and so it's just odd in a 10-year full of odd quotes like that. And so we'll kind of see where that goes. And but that is going to continue to come up and will be the new storyline that has been created by Scott Frost himself.
It's going up there with kind of the all-time quotes, in my opinion. Remember the loss at Minnesota, was it 2019, where he didn't want the sweater, the hoodie comment?
The hoodie gate. Yeah.
I couldn't believe that came out of his mouth.
As he was wearing a hoodie that day.
Yeah. If you're not tough if you're wearing a hoodie outside in pregame warmups in Minneapolis in October.
It was cold, man. I'm cold thinking about it. That was it. Yeah. So I think, and then that'll be something to keep an eye on going forward this week, how the team rebounds and how they kind of came back after having that long plane ride home, which had to be miserable, coming back home after that loss. Like, do they get a day or two off here to kind of reacclimate and readjust with their body clocks and all of that? I think that there are numerous storylines going into their next football game because, oh, by the way, they played this week. Northwestern does not, but Nebraska does play this week. And so they've got to, kind of ramp it back up to get ready to play another football game and kind of shake that one off for what they would hope to be to win a couple of games back to back here and then set up a game against Oklahoma where you just kind of see what happens. But right now, there are many more pressing and bigger questions that we have to get to before they can even think about Oklahoma, and that really shouldn't be in their minds, but it can be in ours. But make sure you guys, that'll do it for us today. Make sure you guys like the video, subscribe to the Inside Nebraska YouTube channel. Also, pop over to the Nebraska Rival site, nebraska.rivals.com. Make sure you subscribe for all of the insider information and great content over there, as well as we've got full coverage of the game. We also have full coverage of volleyball. They've got their season started up here, and they're starting off undefeated as the #1 team in the land. Got a couple of sweeps this weekend too. We will catch you guys later.